Alright, this is 10-Minute Technique, the series where I show you an easy writing technique you can take away and add to your own writing in around about 10 minutes. Today I'm talking about flashbacks. So, if you've never written a flashback before, stick with me and hopefully you'll pick up some pointers, and if flashbacks are old hat for you, then watch on and judge me and let me know if you agree with my approach. I've read a fair bit of hate for flashbacks over the past few years. They tend to get looked down on. Personally, I don't really understand why. As a reader, I really like it when a story jumps about to different points in a character's life or a location's life. I think it can be more interesting than when a story just starts at one point and ends at however long afterwards. That, of course, is dependent on a flashback being done well. So, how do you do a flashback well? The first thing I think to consider is how to transition from the present of your story to the past. You can just throw a flashback in there with reckless abandon, but it's probably going to end up being a little bit confusing for your readers. Even if they fairly quickly figure out, okay, right, I'm reading a flashback now, you can still risk losing their interest or frustrating them. Here's an example where no care has been taken at all about the transition into a flashback. They were out there now. She could hear shuffling coming down the stairs from the ground level, ever so slow. She held her nose and mouth closed and tried not to make a sound as they passed her door. She was sitting in the gap among a dozen bales of hay, piled like a pyramid way over her head. The sun was bearing down and she could feel a stripe across her face where it was exposed to the light. Confusing? Yeah. This reads like two separate passages. One is clearly indoors and then the next moment it's outdoors. To read this as it stands, I think, is way too blunt. It leaves the reader entirely on their own to figure out that what they're reading is a flashback. So as writers, it's our job to make that reader's transition into a flashback as clear and easy to follow as possible. I've got two suggestions about how you can do this, and they both work really well. The first is to make the flashback a standalone section of its own. The present of your story, the place you previously were before the flashback, that will end, and then the new part, the new flashback section of the story will begin, and it's announced with some titles, almost like a new chapter entirely of its own. You can be really straightforward and just call out that you're flashing back by introducing it with titles that say the time and the date and the place and all that kind of stuff, like this. So we've got the same text, the same content, but this time we're going to put this right here to kind of signpost the flashback beginning. Exactly how you format the titles, of course, is up to you. You can do that however you want. So the two sections are now totally separate. It's not confusing at all, it's quite clear. It's like they're reading a brand new chapter, so the reader doesn't have to be confused and trying to relate what they're reading now to what they just read. They know it's totally separate. They can just split it down the middle and continue from a new place. This kind of transition to a flashback is perfect for longer passages or for passages where what's going on in the flashback doesn't directly, immediately correlate to what's just happened. Obviously it's part of the same book, so it'll correlate in some way or another, but it's not a direct run-on. It's great for when there's no natural join or nothing specifically in common between the present and the past, but what if there is a join? What if there is something in common? Then we get to suggestion number 2, or transition number 2, which is a little less concrete, a little less direct, and I dare say a bit more finessed. It's basically a matter of taking your present and your past and folding them together. You know that scene in Indiana Jones where he gets through that whole temple and he comes up to that plinth and it's got a golden idol on the top, and he takes a bag of sand and he kind of uses the sand to counterbalance the weight of the idol so that everything is smooth and seamless. We're kind of doing that, but the writing version. Except when you do it right, arrows don't fire out the walls and there's no giant boulder behind you. But what do I mean by this? Okay. By using a common element, something that's present in both the past and the present of your story, you can kind of use that to create a bridge between the two that your reader can go along. It can help them smoothly get from one place to the other without too much disruption, and it can be as simple as a character or a location or a specific action. It doesn't have to be complex. Let's use the same example as before, but instead of using titles to introduce the flashback, we'll try and weave the past and the present together using a common element instead. They were out there now. She could hear shuffling coming down the stairs from the ground level, ever so slow. She held her nose and mouth closed and tried not to make a sound as they passed her door. She screwed up her eyes until all she could see was red. She was 8 again, holding her breath, hidden in the gap among a dozen bales of hay, piled like a pyramid. She could feel the sun burning down, a stripe across her face where it was exposed to the light. So this example uses the situation that the character is in. She's hiding, she's tense. It uses that as the common element between the past and the present. I've transported that situation from her present self in the first part of the story to her past self in the flashback and taken the reader with me. While the scene around her and her location changes from the past to the present, the situation that she's in, being tense and hidden, doesn't change. There are some clarifications. I've said she's 8 in the flashback, but that was more from a story point of view, something I needed to get in when I was writing that part. Other than that, I've not really stated that we've now entered a flashback anywhere, but it's still not confusing because I've used that common element to combine the two. The character's situation staying the same kind of disguises the transfer in weight as I swap the idol and the bag of sand. That's the second way to transfer into a flashback, and my personal favourite, but it really does depend what kind of story you're writing as to how you want to transition into your flashback. And of course, there's probably loads of other ways to transition into a flashback, so if you've got one that's blindingly obvious to you that I haven't covered, then by all means leave it in the comments below and let's keep the discussion going. Speaking of discussion, if you're looking to share some work with other writers or just talk writing with other like-minded folk, then we do have a community Discord server on this channel. I'll link it in the description below. Everyone's free to join, we'd love to see you there. And a big thank you to everyone who's already joined. Lastly, I want to give you my favourite tip for writing flashbacks. It's something I do myself, and the concept I refer to it as in my mind is same but different. Essentially what I try and do is to make the reader feel nostalgic, to get back to the present of your book while they're reading a flashback. I want to make them feel excited to get back to that present. And how I do that is by linking the two together using something that they can see in both the past and the present. Let me clarify what I mean by that. Let's say your character in the present of your story, in the main timeline, carries with them a really battered pocket knife everywhere they go. And in that case, what I would do is when I did a flashback, I would show them discovering or finding this pocket knife for the very first time. I would show it as brand new so that they can feel the life that that's had leading up to the present. A common object like this can make the reader feel like they're never really too far away from the present, even when they're in a flashback section. It stops them feeling so frustrated because they can see how it all links together and it's all part of one big story, really. It makes the flashback feel even more connected and relevant. Same but different. This also works really well for locations as well. You could show a busy, thriving bar in the past and then in the present show a dilapidated, rundown ruin in a post-apocalyptic future. While you're in a flashback, giving your reader all of this new information about your story and asking them to visualise a whole lot more, why not give them something familiar, something they can navigate by, like a flare over the night ocean. For me, the most important part of a successful flashback is transitioning into it correctly, not shaking your reader off or making them feel frustrated that you're sending them back to the past. Make it as easy as possible for them to enjoy your flashback and settle into it. Don't squander the opportunity to make a flashback really immersive because done well, they really are an asset to storytelling. My aim with this channel is to support other writers and to help them develop their writing as I develop mine. I want to help you tell your best story. So, if you want to be a part of that, consider hitting the subscribe button down below for more videos like this every week, and consider joining the Discord community too to talk about writing with other like-minded writerly folk. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.